When Andre Rieu, the Waltz king, passed away in the middle of a performance at the age of 75, the world of music reached its lowest point, and everything changed. But at the height of his genius, what caused that collapse? We must be aware of the specific events in his life in order to comprehend. Andre Rieu was born on October 1, 1949, into a household during a period when parents valued discipline over a child's needs. He was the third of 6 children, and his father's baton governed the home with the same ruthlessness as he dominated the stage. His father, also named Andre, was a well-known conductor who was revered by orchestras, but children terrified him at home. Their house was devoid of laughter and melodies. Love was frigid and abstract. Andre would eventually admit, without digging up a wound, that his parents didn't love him. His mother had an obsession with abilities and academics. Imagination, in her opinion, was a liability. It was yelled back at him through the house like an indictment when a teacher complimented his artistic abilities. The urge to be creative was a weakness, not a strength. However, everything changed when he turned 5. A slim, elegant 18-year-old raised him. She served as his initial violin instructor. She did not chastise him. He was urged to feel by her. Young Andre discovered something he had never heard of in her bow sweep. Liberty. It was a tremor that sounded like life, yet it was neither love nor passion. And he was certainly amazed. Then he started playing music, and that entrancing sensation wasn't a victory, rather, it was the beginning of something that would emerge from deep within him. Scales were practiced by other kids. He sought resonance, but happiness had a price. His developing love of waltzes during his adolescence ran counter to his father's austerity. His beau's lyrics were derided at home. He heard his father yell at him, "I didn't raise you to play waltzes." Those were not merely reprimands. Their goal was to destroy his soul. When Marjorie showed up about 1968, that was the last nail in his coffin. Not a conductor's score, but Andre's chosen companion. His mother greeted her angrily. "Go," she said. It was rejection after rejection. Andre left that very evening. He didn't go back. Their house was unaltered. As he became famous, he was an empty shell. His concerts were not attended by his parents. Not once. He couldn't get rid of the memories of the quiet at home, even in the midst of arenas full of devoted followers. He once admitted, "I tried to figure out why my childhood felt so empty for years in therapy. That gap was never filled by the clapping, but music gave him a sense of being recognized at last." The violin was a lifeline, not just an instrument. Windows opened whenever he played. Andre snapped and began the uprising in 1978, following years of formal orchestral testing and enduring the sterile echo of concert halls. The Maastricht Salon Orchestra was founded by him. 12 hopeful dreamers without costumes. These youthful aspirations were performed in forgotten border towns, backyard weddings, and small community halls. They were merely doing music for its own sake. Just sound, shared, and human, no critics, no elaborate sets. All of that was external, but on the inside, someone else was at the center of everything. Marjorie was the one. She managed business meetings, bookings, and ghostwriter arrangements and was steady, accurate, and invisible. The unseen power underlying his apparent sorcery was her. Sell more records, not for his interest or curiosity, but to build the future, she joked when he paused at the thought of purchasing a dilapidated castle. This silent revolution was not broadcast on television. Someone released it. He officially established the Johann Strauss Orchestra in 1987 with 12 players and a bold goal to bring back the soul of music. The solemn formality was abandoned. They invited delight by wearing colorful tailcoats in place of dark ones. Their 1988 New Year's Day debut was electrifying, complete with dancing lights and tunes of laughter. Audiences roared, but critics scoffed at them. It wasn't a concert they were at. Music was being reclaimed. By 1995, a spontaneous change occurred during the UEFA Champions League final in Vienna, one of Europe's biggest stages. Rieu and his orchestra stepped onto the field. Football fans paused when Shostakovich's Waltz in Tuesday soared. Clapped and swayed. Sports tension was melted by strain, and the stadium was alight with grace. The timing felt cosmic when Ajax scored. The incident turned into a legend. Strauss & Company quickly rose to the top of the Netherlands charts for 19 weeks. It was unprecedented in the world of classical music. Millions of copies were sold worldwide. Australia immediately followed. More than 38,000 spectators crammed into stadium seats in Melbourne to watch a live fairy tale. Additionally, they own 8 of the top 10 DVDs in the nation. They all belong to him. Pop stars like Pink and AC/DC were standing next to him. Even with all of that accomplishment, some people still disapproved of what he was doing. The traditionalist was the one who shrank back. One conductor sneered that joy had no place in art while spitting musical erotica and making fun of lights and dresses. It meant everything, nevertheless, to Rieu's viewers. The emotion of the grandparents, who were crying, had found a platform in the dancing family. He meant it when he claimed that you don't experience the solemn silence that turns people off when you're with us. Concerts were not what he was selling. He was giving the populace hope. But the maestro was inconsolable behind the sold-out stadiums and dazzling lights. At the height of his success, in 2010, a new issue emerged. Andre developed an inner ear infection due to a viral illness. Balance is crucial for a violinist. His world fell apart, concerts and tours were cancelled. The man whose primary selling point was "can do" had to admit, "I can't." There was more to it than sickness. He had been unaware that he had a fracture. It was more than just illness, to be exact. It was the instant a myth broke, exposing itself in a distorted mirror and a shuddering unbalance. A viral infection of the vestibular nerve, which attacked Andre Rieu's inner ear and sent him into unrelenting turmoil, killed him in 2010 at the age of 62. Nothing provided support, not even the floor underneath him, as the room swung around. His hazy eyes scanned the walls that whirled with ruthless velocity as he lay bedridden. Now the guy who had never faltered felt adrift. Doctors prescribed rest. Like cheap sheet music, the tour itinerary and the man who had formerly been as inflexible as a cement wall fell apart. Andres took a long time to recuperate. Every kind of traditional treatment was unsuccessful. Then an Australian fan wrote a letter. He gave vestibular exercises that helped him regain his balance and talked about his personal struggle with the same virus. Desperate, Andres took the advice. The distortion gradually stopped. He stood up again, shakily at first, then firmly, after withdrawing for months. He eventually made a comeback to the stage and led a tour that signaled not only his musical return but also his reputation's revival. Although everyone believed he had returned to his ideal self, no emotional or physical hurt truly heals without leaving a mark. The dizziness subsided, but his balance was still precarious. Although management quickly denied the resurgence of disequilibrium problems in 2012, they acknowledged that the ear, once attacked, was still vulnerable. They also warned that he would be in serious risk, particularly if he was performing on stage, if there was a potential that his illness would return. Then 2016 arrived. The trumpet of sorrow blasted once more in Leeds on a December trip. Andre held a special place in his heart for a companion. He was a long-standing buddy and trombonist named Ruud Merckx, who always went with the group. The fact that he had passed away while sleeping was shocking, but everyone else was going about their own business. In Andre's view, it was nothing less than a massive earthquake. He stopped the remaining shows in London, Birmingham, and Glasgow without hesitation, and cancelled the Nottingham show in the middle of the tour. This was not sickness. It was grief, irreversible and irrevocable. Later on, he acknowledged that he was like a brother. A family in every manner, the orchestra swayed in grief. The weight of what had disappeared from Andre's life was there when the music performances came back. He persevered despite everything, and in 2019, he took the stage when a terrible sickness struck, causing him to tremble and sweat. Those who knew him saw how he was struggling with that on stage, yet the smile persisted. Then came the moment that would shatter him. He had to play 6 sold-out shows in Mexico City in March 2024. The triumph seemed promising. Acuity became crisis after only the second performance. Like storm clouds, sickness, travel lag, and altitude came together. According to rumors, he faltered backstage. Fever, disorientation, and dyspnea. Touching his phone, he whispered a call to Marjorie. "This is not how I want my first concert day to go." That was how 4 concerts ended. More than 40,000 ticket buyers were incensed. All 125 members of the orchestra were sent home in the middle of the tour. Tickets were refunded and flights were reversed. They have no way to maintain their peaceful dignity in the midst of emergency turmoil. Something new occurred during that pause. His son Pierre came forward. He was no longer only a tour manager or a son. He turned into a shield. No more marathons across continents. The speed decreased. Performed only in Europe. Regulated timetable. Go to sleep. Get well. A gentle stronghold centered on Andre's well-being. There was no retreat. It was the right decision. However, they would not have had to deal with the fallout from what was about to happen next if it had been taken a little sooner. Everything depended on Pierre in the interim. Once in charge of logistics, he was now in charge of tempo. Where Andre would have charged ahead, he placed brakes. Now, every flight and every location went through a screening. Is he capable of doing this without braking? He took on the role of bearer, enabling Andre to recover his music without sacrificing himself. Everything was changed by that collapse and that choice. This was the beginning of a new maestro, not the demise of an old one. Someone who knew that each note worth playing had to be earned with care rather than endurance. And as a result, he became more memorable and human. Though not all the scars had healed, the change was apparent by the summer of 2024. Slowing down had a hidden cost for 75-year-old Andre Rieu, who had built his life on the road. The steady motion had been his lifeblood for decades. Every performance bore a distinct type of pressure now that Pierre was tightening the reins. The need to demonstrate that he was still capable, both for the public and for himself. That July, he went back to his hometown of Maastricht. On his schedule, it was the safest arena. The one location where every face in the crowd was aware of the man's past. As they had done for years, the shows sold out right away. However, the preparatory work behind the scenes had changed. Rehearsal blocks include information about medical clearances, oxygen availability backstage, and rest periods. His team now collaborates with doctors and physical therapists, having previously concentrated on lighting cues and sound balance. The checklist was attached on his dressing room wall, but the audience never saw it. It was a subdued admission that his body was no longer his silent companion. It was a short list, but it was accurate. Drink plenty of water before the show, keep the encore brief, and avoid handshakes after the show until your heart rate has steadied. Pierre applied these regulations with the same gravity his father had previously shown for tempo indications. Nevertheless, there were times when the old pace attempted to prevail despite the protections. Lost in the surge of strings, he played a waltz longer than intended on the third night in Maastricht. For a short while, it seemed like the past as the orchestra played and the audience stood. However, his shirt stuck to him with the same wet weight he had experienced in Mexico City as he left the platform. Pierre's face conveyed what neither of them wanted to say out loud. They had almost gone over the remaining line. The modifications were artistic as well as physical. Andre started moving some parts about, reducing the volume in ways that only a skilled listener could detect. There were less high-energy polkas. The set list started to focus more on symphonic storytelling, slower waltzes, and ballads. Unaware that the modification was actually a tactic, fans welcomed it. It was a method of creating the appearance of limitless endurance while using less energy to do it. He spent more time at home in between performances than he had in decades. He used the garden behind his 15th-century house and the stone streets of Maastricht as a rehearsal space. He kept his energy bank full for performance days by practicing in privacy rather than spending hours with the entire orchestra. Friends observed a fresh readiness to say no, fewer late-night calls, and a gentler rhythm to his voice. The cheering was different when Andre Rieu returned to the stage following his protracted health fight. It was more than a party. Relief was felt. The king of the waltz's next performance was uncertain for months. He was stopped in the middle of his tour by a viral ailment in 2009. He had been cautioned by doctors that pushing too soon could ruin his career. But for Andre, leaving the music was never an option. Antwerp hosted the return's first concert. Prior to his illness, all of the tickets were sold out. A smaller performance was anticipated by many. Rather, Rieu performed for 3 hours straight without skipping a note. The astute observer saw the changes, but he still greeted his audience with that usual warmth. Between pieces, he sat. He took his time. Additionally, his son Pierre was spotted sidestage for the duration of the show for the first time in decades. During his father's illness, Pierre Rieu had been quietly managing a large portion of the business, as you are aware. In addition to managing schedules and overseeing the production, he also decided whether or not the tour would continue. He was clearly now a part of the safety net of the show. Andre acknowledged in subsequent interviews that Pierre was strictly instructed to take over if he had symptoms of vertigo. It was a big responsibility. It was more than just music. This has to do with the health of his father. Fans continue to discuss a memorable moment that happened halfway through the 2010 tour. During the encore in Maastricht, Andre stopped and beckoned Pierre to the front of the stage. Pierre reluctantly entered the spotlight to the clamor of the audience. Andre gave him a microphone and invited him to join the orchestra in singing. The audience didn't care that Pierre wasn't a professional vocalist. For thousands of people to witness, it was a unique look into their intimate relationship. The video, which revealed a side of Andre that was rarely shown in interviews, went viral online. The father, not the maestro. The pace was still brutal behind the scenes. Careful planning was necessary for Andre's recuperation, but touring demands left little time for relaxation. It was quite hot in Brazil. Jet lag in Australia was terrible. In order to arrange the most physically taxing numbers early in the show, when Andre's energy was at its peak, his team modified the set lists. The danger was always there, even then. Everything may end again if his condition returned. During those years, Pierre's job became even more significant. He was doing more than just logistics. He developed into a silent protector who occasionally overrode his father's intuition. Andre acknowledged that he occasionally disagreed with Pierre about slowing down, but he also understood that the tour could go on because of his son's caution. Subtle alterations in Andre's performance style were noticed by fans. There were additional opportunities for audience participation and storytelling pauses in between performances. It was more than just energy conservation. Andre was deliberately trying to make his performances more personal. His goal was for the audience to experience the adventure with him. All the triumphs, all the anxieties, all the highs. The Rieu machine was back in full swing by 2012. Even if the tours crossed continents once more, his illness's shadow persisted. In interviews, Andre talked candidly about how it had impacted him. He no longer believed he was unbeatable. Each performance felt like a present rather than a promise. The return was astounding in terms of finances. The excursions brought in millions of dollars. Sales of DVDs increased. The Maastricht concerts evolved into yearly international film festivals. However, a continuous balancing act was required for the success. The need to safeguard the guy at the center of it all while providing the spectacular show that fans had anticipated. Pierre's impact on corporate choices became much more apparent. In order to give the orchestra more time to practice without feeling rushed, he worked with venues to extend setup periods. He demanded that medical personnel attend every performance, regardless of venue, and he started getting ready for a topic Andre hardly ever brought up in public: what would happen if he was unable to continue touring on this scale? Those close to Andre noticed the signals, but he dismissed the concept of slowing down in interviews. The distances between the excursions grew a little bit, but they were still enormous. More time for recuperation was made possible by the calendar. It was preservation, not a retreat. Nevertheless, the requests persisted. The calendar had more than 100 concerts in 2016. Constant travel, shifting weather patterns, and the mental strain of conducting an orchestra in several different nations were all part of that. Only the sparkle in the song was visible to the fans. When the lights went out, they failed to notice the fatigue. Then, during a tour to Europe, the incident occurred. It was serious, but not dramatic enough to garner media attention. Andre waited longer than normal in between numbers during a Vienna performance. Approached the stage and observed. The music went on, but the atmosphere changed. Andre later said that during that set, he had experienced dizziness. The memory remained with them both even after he ended the presentation. It served as a warning that danger always existed, regardless of how cautious they were. Without revealing the flaws to the public, it strengthened Pierre's implicit duty to defend his father. Andre reduced some of the show's physical elements the next year. He gave his orchestra members more responsibility. He supported their individual performances, allowing himself brief breaks without interfering with the concert's rhythm. Fans adored it. They interpreted it as kindness. Andre saw the modifications as a tactic as well, but they weren't a retreat. The Maastricht concerts broke attendance records in 2019. Andre bowed his hands and smiled as he stood on that stage. Thousands of others are singing along. He wasn't finished, even though it was a moment that might have been the ideal conclusion to a career. The travels abruptly ceased in 2020 when the epidemic struck. It was the longest hiatus Andre had ever taken from performing as an adult. In addition to practicing, recording, and maintaining in communication with his musicians, he used it as a period of introspection. He got a glimpse of what life might be like without touring all the time during the forced pause. He came back to the stage full of energy after the constraints were removed. The crowds had grown in size, volume, and emotion. Live music had been missing. Andre didn't realize how much he had missed them. The trips have continued in recent years, but with lessons gained from the past. The timetables are more intelligent. The journey is designed to reduce stress. At nearly every performance, Pierre stays at his side, still attentive and prepared. The age of Andre Rieu is 75. He continues to play with the same fervor that made him famous throughout the world. However, people who are familiar with his past are aware of the significance of every note. Each performance is a triumph over the sickness that threatened to keep him quiet. Andre has kept one thing from the public, though, and that is a choice that might alter everything. Andre and Pierre talked about the prospect of doing their biggest ever last global tour in a recent private chat that was overheard by a team member. There are no dates yet. Everything they've constructed will be put to the test if it occurs, albeit no specifics have been made public. The link between father and son, the music, and the endurance. Andre's ability to succeed is no longer the question, for the first time since his return. If he should.